I'm Aaron from PhoneDog.com, and maybe you don't want to spend $199 or $299 on a wireless device. Maybe you want to spend $0 or $50, but you want a device with awesome specifications. Well, entry-level devices are getting up there in specs, and the Pantech Flex is one of those. Defined as an entry-level device, it's got a 1.5 gigahertz dual-core Snapdragon S4 CPU, a 4.3-inch display, 8-megapixel camera, and more. Is it the device to get on AT&T for $50 with 4G LTE connectivity, or should you go with something else? We'll find out in the full review, but first, some love to Best Buy Mobile for giving us devices like this for use in our One Paw Bandit giveaway game, which we turn around and give to you on the site at instantwin.phonedog.com. When you go into Best Buy Mobile to get this, you won't have to worry about rebates, waiting 8 to 10 weeks for a debit card, filling out paperwork. At Best Buy Mobile, you walk out the door paying the after rebate price of $49.99. Let's take a look at this. Is this the one? We'll find out in the full review, which starts right now. When you look at the Pantech Flex and you see who it's designed for, you may think, you know what, specs-wise, it's not the best phone in the world. And if you look at historical trends, that's been the case. But now, it's awesome because I see a lot of manufacturers, a lot of these OEMs really gearing some of these even entry-level smartphones like the Pantech Flex to people of all types. You know, this thing is available from AT&T for $49.99 after mail-in rebate or after applicable rebates with a 2-year agreement, $50, and you would think, okay, old processor, old display, terrible camera. That was the case a year ago, not the case now because they're redefining the phrase entry level. This device has a 1.5 gigahertz dual-core Snapdragon S4 CPU, a 4.3-inch Super AMOLED QHD display, 540 by 960 pixels, an 8-megapixel camera with 1080p HD video recording, a 1,830 milliamp hour battery, and then of course a 2-megapixel front-facing camera as well. So throw your conceptions out the window of what you think an entry-level device is in today's world, at least, because it's totally different. It's also running Android 4.0, and while yeah, it's got some specs or some things in the user interface that may appeal to entry-level people, specs-wise, it's a pretty decent device. Now, obviously, there's still a distinguishing, feature kind of change, if you will, between a device like this with a non-HD display. You look at this in the Galaxy S3 and you're like, what's different, for example? You got a bigger display, an HD display, a better camera, a larger battery. But hey, 4G LTE on this device, and with a dual-core processor, these things are quickly coming up, and the gap between entry-level and high-end is narrowing. I gave you a little hand visual there. Entry-level, high-end, narrowing. Thought you might appreciate that. But anyway, Pantech's UI pre-installed on this device, and it's a beautiful looking Android device. Power button over here on the right side, micro USB charging port over here, 3.5 millimeter headphone jack. Say that 3 times fast. I say that all the time on camera. Volume rocker up and down, and then of course a metal back here as well. Actually, the battery cover pops off, but this part is metal in particular. 1,830 milliamp hour removable battery. AT&T logo over here. On-screen buttons, as you can see, and again, Android 4.0 out of the gate. So speaking of out of the gate, out the applications, you get AT&T Family Map, Amazon Kindle, AT&T Navigator, you get Document Viewer, and you can see Pantech's UI in full force here, along with keyring, movies, music player, and again, things like, music player, for example, something you'd see in stock Android. You can see that the colors have been changed, the tabs up top have been changed, all to kind of resemble Pantech's user interface, and then of course the on-screen buttons. Now what I like here, take a look and you'll notice the menu button over here on the far right side. I like that they kind of integrated that down in the bottom as opposed to the HTC solution pre-Sense 4.1 where there was kind of just a weird menu button hanging out in the middle of nowhere. It's integrated down here into the bottom bar, so even when you're in Messages, for example, taking a look here, you can see I'll click on Messages and I've got the menu button up here at the top, but it stays in one of those top or bottom areas as opposed to having its own dedicated space, which is really nice. 5 home screens on this device, and I can pinch to zoom out, and of course I can add panels as well if I want to total up to 7 panels on this device with my home screen being right there in the middle. Back, home, recent applications here, I can easily swipe to remove those, get out of those in typical Android format right there. And then again, 4G LTE connectivity gives me quick access as logging in under Heron Baker. As you can see, tabs up here at the top, again, very customized, and the jury's still out for me. I find Pantech's UI to be very easy for new smartphone people. For somebody that prefers, stock Android, those Android purists out there, they're not going to like this as much because there are quite a few customizations. I would say kind of on the scale of, what I would consider to be Motorola's new user interface, which is very stock Android similar, to LG's perhaps, LG's new user interface, which is again, a little bit of more customization. I'd say this is somewhere, up near LG, or it's definitely customized. You can see some heavy customizations, particularly here. You got your tabs up top, and it's very fluid. I don't see a speed slowdown by any means, but you can tell that it's very heavily skinned over stock Android. So we'll load up PhoneDog.com here. and you can see the keyboard. 4.3 inch, again, Super AMOLED QHD display here, so sweet spot for a lot of people. Previously I said 4 inches was a sweet spot for a lot of people. Now I'm saying 4.3. Obviously things change over the years, and as we move up on screen sizes, regardless of whether you like it or not, I think our ideas of how to use our devices changes. And so, hey, 5.3 inches, 5.5 inches, 5 inches, none of these existed back several years ago on a smartphone. So now you see that, you're used to it, and regardless of whether you own the device or not, I think there comes a time where I can't talk today. Comes a time rather, it's because I didn't get any sleep last night and because I've been traveling non-stop for the past couple of days due to work. But pinch to zoom, relatively responsive here. I'm just going to forget that thought and move along because it wasn't going anywhere fast. So new tab here, and again, recent applications, and of course you got your menu button here where you can share the page, go to brightness, request desktop site. But again, I really can't tell you how pleased I am with this device because it's so nice, and not just this one, but the Galaxy Stellar as well. So a lot of these devices in the free to $50 price point, it's great to see them bringing nice features. Just because the device is free or just because the device is $50 doesn't mean you have to skimp on the processor. Obviously, some things are expected. Some skimping is expected. The camera can't be as high-end as a $200 device. Perhaps the display can't be HD like a $200 device. But hey, for $50, I think this is a great device. So you saw the web there. Let's take a look at messages as well, because I want to go back and focus on the keyboards that come out of the gate. So obviously, again, you can see some heavy Pantech customization here with your to area, and of course a place where you can tap to enter text. Now, 4.3 inch display combined with a stock Android keyboard means it's relatively easy to type on. Now, somebody that's coming from perhaps anywhere from a 4.7 inch all the way up to a 5+ inch display may have a challenge typing on this, but otherwise, portrait to landscape transitions nice and fast. You can really see that S4 processor moving quickly, and then of course you get some alternatives out of the gate. You get Google Voice typing, Swift Key for Pantech, and then Swipe as well. So it's nice to see Swift Key coming out of the gate. This is perhaps their first commercial deal that I can think of where it's actually releasing on a device that's being released on a carrier. You can obviously download Swift Key from Google Play, but this is the first time to my knowledge that I've seen it pre-installed on a device on a carrier. So we can say the Quick Brown Fox is a big fan of Swift Key. Which I actually don't mind Swift Key, but I actually prefer the stock Android keyboard. I should say stock Android keyboard from Android 4.0 or Android 4.1. I think it's a fantastic keyboard. That's why it actually came with Swift Key out of the box, but I switched it over to Android keyboard, which is also pre-installed, and have been using it since. Absolutely love this keyboard. I think it's very responsive, easy to use. And speaking of easy to use, another thing I really appreciate about Pantech, following in the footsteps of Samsung and LG, Pantech has opted to allow you to put a percentage meter up in the top right-hand corner. So now you can see that you have 51% battery left, for example, as opposed to some arbitrary battery meter where you're like, I'm not quite sure how much I have left. Am I going to make it through this meeting? Am I going to make it on the road trip? You've got your percentage up there so you know exactly where you're at. So you've got quick settings up here, and obviously you can see those are separated by dots with my vibrate, Wi-Fi, airplane mode, GPS, Bluetooth, and more. Power saver, I've got data turned on. Then I have my details down here, and obviously ongoing, the keyboard's ongoing, so I can open the details as well. Sound setting, Wi-Fi setting, display setting. So it's nice to get a couple of different options out of the gate, and regardless of whether you use these from the home screen or the the notifications bar, it's nice to have those pre-installed up there, along with, in typical Android 4.0 format, a little button to access your settings. Now, this is where this device gets really cool, because let's say, Grandpa doesn't need a smartphone, but you want Grandpa to have a smartphone because you want him to learn how to use Google Maps. Well, let's say he's just not ready for that. I'm going to show you something cool. It's called Change Experience, and I can change from Pantech Easy to Pantech Standard, reverse that. Pantech Standard Experience to Pantech's Easy Experience. And this is really cool because if you're coming from a feature phone, take a look at how feature phony this looks, for lack of a better phrase. You got your buttons down here at the bottom with recent applications, but basically it's kind of like a skin on top of a skin here, where I can scroll down. I've got easy access to the battery percentage, the time, whether I'm on LTE or not, my signal strength indicator. I've got some quick settings up here at the top, alarm, Bluetooth, Wi-Fi. This is going to be great for those people that are moving into a smartphone for the first time because it's super easy. No home screens over here to mess with. As you can see, I've got web, quick contacts, and then shortcuts. And again, very incredibly easy. We'll load up phonedog.com so you can see. phonedog.com. And we'll load it up over here, and of course it loads in the typical browser, but when you go back home it takes you back to the easy mode. Of course, messages here as well, very easy to use. You'll notice nice big font, and so obviously they're gearing this towards somebody that's a new, first-time smartphone user, somebody that's probably hard of seeing, as you can tell here, with larger text. Call log over here as well which you got these little quick buttons, messages, camera, phone, and then menu, you'll see how much it looks like a feature phone. This, again, is great for those people that are migrating over for the first time and something that's very impressive on this device. Stay tuned, because in part 2 we're going to cover speed tests both on the network side and on the device side, because even though this has an easy mode, this device will make a great choice for people that are looking for a nice smartphone at a reasonable price. Stay tuned for part 2.